Hello friends, I'm Kendra Winchester and welcome back to my channel. As you may have gathered, I have been fighting the light for a little bit and the screaming children outside, the screaming corgis inside, so we're just gonna roll with it. But if you couldn't gather by the Appalachian t-shirt and the Appalachian bookshelves, today we're talking about Appalachian literature. Now, many of you are new here, so welcome. Thank you for subscribing. But you may be wondering, what on earth is Appalachia, Kendra? I'm so glad you asked. So Appalachia is a region loosely based along the Appalachian mountain range in the eastern United States. It's one of the oldest mountain ranges in the world, and it is often a very isolated place, not always. There are Appalachian cities and there are urban Appalachian people, but the majority of it is more connected towards rural culture, and it is a very eclectic place. There's no singular type of Appalachian person, but unfortunately there are a lot of harmful stereotypes about Appalachian people. And if you would like to learn more about that, like a little Appalachian Lit 101, I'm going to link all the episodes of Read Appalachia, the podcast that I mentioned, and that will be in the description box. So you can learn so much more and have all of your questions answered. Today, I'm going to be talking about some of the Appalachian books that I have read since, I think it was 2022 at some point. Gave you all an update, but I wanted to cover even more books that I have read. There are so many good ones. And so it was very difficult to figure this out of what ones I would mention. But there are so many incredible books out just this year even. But I digress. I will narrow it down, but I think a lot of people forget that a lot of vibrant and incredible writers are from Appalachia, like Nikki Giovanni, Nikki Finney, Bell Hooks, Frank X. Walker, Crystal Wilkinson, Annie Dillard, Cormac McCarthy, Wendell Berry, Ron Rash, like so many bigger than life kind of incredible authors are from the region. And that's because there's such a rich literary tradition from the region, and that's something that I really want to delve into with the podcast. So I'm just going to give you a little preview here of some of my favorites and go from there. And yeah, I don't even know where to start. I'm just staring at this pile of books in front of me. Let's start with this one. So this is Those We Thought We Knew by David Joy. David Joy has written, I think this is his 5th novel, I want to say, and he features Appalachian, North Carolina. This particular book is about a Black woman, I believe from Atlanta, who goes up to Appalachian, North Carolina to visit her grandmother, where her family is from. And as she's finishing up her MFA, she's inspired by the generations of Black women in her family, and so she's making an art piece as a tribute to them. At the same time, a deputy discovers a list of people's names in the glove box of this guy he pulls over, and the people's names are all names of people in the Klan, and all these names are prominent members of the town that he lives in. So from there, all sorts of things begin to unravel. When I was interviewing David Joy, he talked about how he wanted white people from the town that he lives in, which is similar to the town in this book, that he wanted them to start addressing the systemic racism that's been part of their culture for centuries, and he wanted to start that process. He wanted this book to start those discussions. And so that was a very interesting conversation, especially when I went to a live event where he was discussing this book, and there were just so many questions about the book, and it was sparking those conversations. So I thought that was really interesting to see, that this book is doing what he intended it to do. His characters are always really interesting to me, and he has an eye and an ear for storytelling. And so I interviewed him for the birthday episode of Read Appalachia, which was a delightful episode because I just basically made the theme dealer's choice, and I got to interview whoever I wanted, basically. I normally have very themed episodes, but sometimes I want to interview an author and they just don't fit in the theme, so here we go. The other author from that episode is Joy Priest. Her debut, the collection Horsepower, is it's just phenomenal. She grew up in Louisville, Kentucky, and she went to school in Lexington and then eventually went on to get her MFA, and she's part of the Appalachian Poets Collective, and she writes a lot about what it's like being a Black woman in Kentucky. And one of the things that I really appreciated talking to her about is her most recent anthology that she edited, which is the Louisville Poets Anthology, Once a City Said. This is an anthology of poets from Louisville, Kentucky, and it really came about because when the police shot and killed Breonna Taylor, Joy Priest was not at home at the time. She was at a different, like a writing retreat or something, working on things. And so she was seeing, the footage on television, and the people on the ground were people she knew. They were the poets that she had been in community with, and she wanted to know their thoughts because she saw a lot of like national outlets kind of parachuting in to cover the protests, but she wanted to have a reaction of actual people who lived in Louisville. And so that's really what kind of inspired this poetry collection. And so it was really a moment she wanted to capture in poetry as opposed to prose in a lot of ways. So this is just an incredible anthology. So definitely check it out. Joy Priest in general is just an incredible poet, and I am so excited that she was able to come on the podcast and chat with me about her work. One of the books that I feel like is going under the radar, especially for those of us who like all things weird and wonderful, that is House of Cotton by Monica Brashears. Monica is a Black Appalachian author from Knoxville, and so her protagonist is also a Black woman from Knoxville, and her protagonist, her grandmother has just died, and she gets this job at a mortician's house, and her job is to dress up like people's dead loved ones. And so they pay her boss for her to dress up like their dead loved one and pretend to be her on like Zoom calls or whatever. And it's just like the weirdest thing. There are ghosts and these sinister like spirits almost, and it really looks at grief and what that looks like, and how people grieve. And it is just full of Appalachian folklore and folkways, particularly Black Appalachian culture and folkways. And it is just a phenomenal book in a lot of ways. It is definitely a bit out there. It's not going to be for everyone, but I feel like it just stems from these traditions from the Appalachian Mountains, and it's just beautiful. Very strange, but very beautiful. So this one is Take What You Need by Idra Novi, and she is a Jewish Appalachian author from Pennsylvania. A lot of people don't realize that the majority of Pennsylvania counties are in Appalachia. And so this book really looks at the more Appalachian North experience, and it's about this woman who has left her hometown in Pennsylvania, and her stepmom still lives back in her hometown. And it's really this, person trying to figure out where she came from. Does she still fit there? And can she still have a relationship with her stepmother, even though she and her father broke up? And it's like a whole experience with these two women. And it just was really interesting and very much a character-driven story. And I still think about the characters in this book a lot. There's just so much, Pennsylvanian culture in this book. I am not from Pennsylvania, but my grandfather is. And I'm just like, yes, I see this. It makes sense. But Idra Novi has written several different books, but I didn't know that she was Appalachian until I got the email about this book coming out, and I was so delighted. So if you want to know more about Appalachian North or Northern Appalachia, whatever you want to call it, This is definitely one to pick up. A poetry collection that I recently read is Becoming Appalachian, Poems by Lisa Kwong, and she came on the podcast for the poetry episode. Bernard Clay, who I've already talked about in my Appalachian Lit series, he was also the other author on that episode. But I never read Lisa Kwong's poetry before, and so she came on and read some poems, and I obviously read the collection before talking to her, and it was such a beautiful collection about what it's like being Appalachian, as she describes. She is a member of the Appalachian Poets Collective, like Joy Priest and Bernard Clay, and so it was just really cool to see how she was in community with these other writers, but also as an Asian American woman living in Appalachia, what that's like, being Chinese American in Virginia and working at her parents' restaurant and all these different things. And I believe she's captured something so incredible with this collection. The last book I'm going to mention today is this one. It's hard to believe this came out last year because most of the discussion has happened in this calendar year. But this is one of my treasured books because I have an edition that does not have the Oprah Book Club logo on it, and I will treasure this forever and for always. Did I just buy the Barnes & Noble special edition? Yes, I did. Will I be keeping both of them? Yes. I actually read David Copperfield so that I could read this right after and kind of gauge what was going on with it and how much I enjoyed it. This was actually our very first book club pick for Appalachian Bookshelf, which is a book club that I run with Callie and Chuck over at Appalachia, which is an Appalachian podcast that really looks at culture and politics in the region. It's a great podcast. Go check it out. But this was our discussion pick, and we all had very different feelings about it. So I will include the episode from that, both their episode and mine, because they kind of are part one and part two of the discussion. But I really, this book, it's been so interesting to have people realize oh right, Barbara Kingsolver's Appalachian, and she also has a lot of opinions about it, and she's going to fight for her community. And so to see this book take off and for people around the world to read a book about your region is just wild to me. I grew up having no books about my region, and now everyone's talking about it. I don't know what to feel. But I am so glad that this is starting conversations about some of the assumptions that people make about Appalachia. I think that ultimately was Barbara Kingsolver's mission. So obviously well-deserved Pulitzer. But yeah, this is about Demon Copperhead, who is a Melungeon young man from Appalachian Virginia, right? Appalachian Virginia, near the Tennessee border, somewhere in that vicinity. And so this is about his life, and it's loosely based on David Copperfield's the novel. So you can see she hits it beat for beat. And reading the reviews for this book are wild. They're so different based on whatever country they're in. I was endlessly fascinated by the cultural reception of this book, and maybe that says something that I find that discussion almost as interesting as the book itself, because that was the point of the book, right? So that's this book. I really enjoyed it. I want to hear your thoughts on this book. If you have done videos about this that you would like me to see, because I've missed so much while I've been gone, and this did come out almost a year ago. But please link your videos. I would love to hear your thoughts. Please give me your thoughts and your favorite Appalachian reads in the comments, and I will talk to you all later.